Yay Networks.
Welcome to the Great Girlfriends Podcast, where we discuss life, love, laughter, and everything in between. I'm your host, Sybil Amuti, and I can't wait for you to hear all of the Great Girlfriend magic on today's show. So without further ado, grab something great to drink, grab your pen and your paper, and get ready for this week's episode. Enjoy! Oh my goodness, Great Girlfriends. Oh, happy day, because today, and just grab your pen and paper in advance of me saying anything today, because our conversation is going to kickstart, stimulate, activate all of your creative business juices, because our guest today, Lindsay Pinchuk, has done it and is doing it so well. And Lindsay, I'm so excited to have you on.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm ready to talk all things, Lindsay, how you got there, how did you do what you did, and so forth. It's okay if I read a little bit about what really just caught me and made me fall in love with you over email?
Yes.
Okay, so here's a little bit about Lindsay. With $500 in her pocket and a baby in her belly, she left a high-powered job as a magazine publishing executive and founded her first company, Bump Club and Beyond, a community of resources, support, and educational tools for millions of parents and parents-to-be across the country. In year one, she turned a profit, growing her company to 7 figures in revenue each year and her community to over 3 million monthly users. Less than a decade later, she led her company through the acquisition of a large agency holding company. After living through the entrepreneurial dream, Lindsay is here to help us ignite our businesses online and offline. Lindsay, thank you.
Thank you.
Being here today. Yes.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for allowing me to share my story.
I'm so excited. So tell me a little bit about, who is Lindsay? I just want to know from the start, who is Lindsay as you see it?
I've always been a connector. Whenever anyone asks me this, that is who I am. I mean, from the time I was young, I was the one who was, oh, someone knows someone who does this. Let me introduce you. And even like on the playground. Okay. So that was always me. And I ended up making a career out of advertising sales, but advertising sales is a lot about connections. It's a lot about relationships. I spent a lot of time entertaining clients and getting them to know me and me getting to know them and building personal relationships with them so that when it came down to the business, they would give it to me. Mm-hmm. And ultimately I got pregnant. We were trying to have a baby and I was so excited to be pregnant. And I was living in Chicago. My husband is from Montreal. I'm from Detroit. And we had no family here. And we had no friends that were pregnant at the same time as us. Lo and behold, I have a lot of friends with 5th graders like mine. I was just first. So, but I said to my husband, like, I have to find people who are going through this at the same time as us. I don't want to wait till the baby's born. I want to have friends who can experience this with me. And I said, I think there's a business in this. And, so I would say I am a connector. I mean, that's really what I have built my whole life off of. That is who I am.
I love that. And it's so good that you know that, because when you do understand and know, like as a connector, you see how you have moved the needle on so many things so effortlessly on one hand, and then other parts where you had to call on people who had other titles and roles to do the other things. As a connector, how easy was it for you to do what you did with that $500 in your pocket and baby in your belly?
So the funny thing is that I had no plan. And the second funny thing is I don't think I realized I was doing what I was doing until I was about 4 to 5 years in, to be very honest with you. I, as a connector, created events for expectant parents. And from those events and from the feedback from the initial events, we started doing more events. And similarly, I started asking brands to be involved. And from those initial brand involvements, I asked other brands to be involved. And it really was kind of like building upon each other. You have to remember, this was in 2010. So there was no Instagram, there was no Snapchat, there was no TikTok, certainly. LinkedIn was a thing, Facebook was a thing, but not Facebook business pages. And so a lot of what I was doing was simply sharing. I was showing up and sharing at these events. I was showing up pregnant, like sharing my woes and connecting with people. I was connecting with people as an expectant mom. And a lot of these women became my friends. A lot of them were initially in playgroup with me and my first daughter. And I showed up and shared and connected with these women and connected them to each other and connected them to the resources that they need, that I needed and knew I wanted as well.
Mhm.
And so the whole premise of the business was built upon community and
Mhm.
connection. And it really wasn't until like year 4, like I said, where like my husband said to me, like, do you know how much money you're going to make this year? And I literally said no, because to your point, you need to ask for outside help on certain things, and bookkeeping is one of those things for me,
Yes, for me
really.
as well.
And
Yes.
and I hired a bookkeeper, and the bookkeeper helped me, and I said to my husband, like, holy shit, like, oh my god, like, I have a real business, like, this is like almost 7 figures. And when it was like
Mhm.
year 4. And
Wow.
so, yeah, and so no, I didn't really know what I was doing. Like, I didn't,
Mhm.
and then when I realized, I was like, all right, like, we have something here, and now we have to get serious about this.
Mhm. Mhm. So okay, you realized that in year 4 that you had something and that there was some meaning and meat on the bone. There was value. But you were close to 7 figures at the time. So prior to that, all of those years, what your business was, you said community and connection. So those were the pieces. And so I'm assuming the product was like the community. The product was
Yes.
community and it was okay, and
So we had
experiences.
a we had a media model.
Mhm.
I'd come from working in magazines. I had worked at the Hearst Corporation for 10 years, and we had a media model. It was, we had people paying to come to events, buying
Mhm.
tickets. So that was
Mhm.
kind of like the subscription. We also had a membership, um, that it wasn't the biggest driver of revenue, but it did drive some. So those were kind of the subscription pieces and like the
Mhm.
circulation, I guess, of like the media. And then
Mhm.
we had our sponsorship, and that was
Mhm.
like the ads and the commercials. And
Mhm.
we had brands paying 4 or 5 figures to work with us because we had a community that was connected with each other, that was connected with me, and that was incredibly engaged. And it's really hard to capture and captivate expectant moms because there's so many things that are flying at them
Yeah.
at all times. And
Yeah.
so they're a hard demographic, and we had them, and they
Mhm.
trusted us. We also didn't compromise our integrity ever.
Mhm.
There were brands that would say to me, can you advertise or can you show this product? And if it was not something that I would use, we didn't show it. That felt
Mhm.
weird to me.
Mhm.
This was before, influencers on Instagram. Um, and so that was how we made money, was really and
Mhm.
truly like sponsorships were the number one way that we made money. And I was selling the community, but it was a very natural sale. It wasn't
Yeah.
forced, and
Mhm.
that's why we were so successful.
Mhm. So when if you were to put this into the steps of how to bootstrap and build, you looking back over years 1 through 4, where there was a lot of build happening and there was a lot of movement and traction that was being put in place. There was a nice infrastructure there. What do you think were some of your steps that really got you to the place where you're like, oh crap, we do need a bookkeeper because we're making real money here? Yeah.
So the first thing was I knew when to ask for help. And so
Mhm.
I had someone come to me who said she ended up working for me for about 7 years. She came to me straight from grad school, and she said, I have no experience working because I went to grad school and I went to summer camp my whole life. Can you give me a job? And I hired her at the time just to do like errands and hourly stuff and help me with events because I had also had a new baby at home.
Mhm.
And we connected in a big way. I adored her, and she told me she wanted to work for me. And so I busted my butt to sell a 5-figure sponsorship, and I started by paying her first. And that is part
Mhm.
of bootstrapping. You are not always going to pay yourself first. And I
Right.
started paying her. She became a full-time employee. She really hit the ground running, and she was my right-hand person. And by her taking on a lot of these smaller, I don't want to even say administrative, they weren't. Like, she was like running the back end operations of our events. I was
Mhm.
able to go out, sell the product, get more sponsors, and ultimately drive more bottom line revenue. So a lot of people, I think, have the misconception that like, oh God, I can't afford anyone, right? Like I can't afford anyone because then how do I pay myself? Well, guess what? Like you're probably not at first.
Yeah.
You're just not. Like,
That's true. Yeah.
there were other benefits that came along with running my own business. I was able to write things off. Like there were certain things that I was able to write off. I was a new mom working in the baby space. I didn't pay for anything for my kids.
Right.
Those were kind of the ways that I paid myself for the first couple of years. In year 4, in year 3, we were approached by 2 really big entities, Target and Nordstrom, at the same time.
Wow.
And yeah, and that is truly, they approached us because we had this engaged community, and they both told me that, and they both wanted to be a part of it, and they both thought that they knew how they wanted to be a part of it. And both of those ways were never going to work with me. They were never going to work with like the DNA of our brand. And I said, you know what? That's not a great way, but how about this? And we created custom activations for both Target and for Nordstrom. Each of them ended up turning into 6-figure deals. And so that was like that was really like when Bump Club was put on the map. And so yeah. Did that answer your question about like about the steps?
You spend a lot of time pitching and putting your business out there. And a lot of times people will wait for people to come to their door. But while you built the community around the content and the culture of the Bump Club was being established, you also spent a lot of time, with outreach and letting brands know who you were and what you were about, and making sure you were pitching for sponsorship, which allowed for Target and Nordstrom to come to your door because the awareness was really growing. So there was a lot of like groundswell is what I'm hearing.
Yes. And here was another thing that really interestingly happened. I had multiple moms come to me and say, I want to bring Bump Club to Austin, to Minneapolis, to San Francisco, to LA. And so I ended up bringing a small group of women on as contractors, and they were running events in their own cities under my blueprint. They weren't franchises, they were contract workers. And the one that was in Minneapolis is really the one that led the activation for Target. I mean, Target heard of us because she was doing events in Minneapolis in a big way. And so that was part of like the growth as well. And you have to remember, I mean, these women were not making big bang, I mean, they wanted to be a part of what we were doing. They believed in Bump Club. They believed in my mission, and they wanted to own something, and they wanted to be a part of it. They trusted me, and I had 5 or 6 employees that grew with the company and were with me at acquisition.
Good stuff. So building the awareness, the outreach on ground, really, really creating a community that people really believe in, that they want to be a part of, and that they wanted to support and advocate for. You ran very lean from what I hear, right? So you ran very
lean. And, a lot of the, I had a lot of like contractors. So like my bookkeeper was a contractor. I eventually hired a part-time CFO, and she was a contractor. She also helped me with like all of the decks and the financials for my acquisition. I had an outside publicist who was a contractor as well. And she was a mom who started her own like solopreneur agency. And so her rates were not that of a large PR agency. So we were really scrappy in terms of the help that we were able to procure. And we also were very scrappy in terms of partnerships. So like we did a lot with like it was like the community first, and then partnerships were really what fueled the community. And whether that was with influencers or celebrities, with book launches, and we were really creative about how we were able to swap and tap into other communities by allowing people to tap into ours. If that makes sense.
Good stuff. Yeah. How did you know it was time for the acquisition? What was the point, or what were some of the questions you were asking yourself that made you know you were ready to transition your business?
So in my head, I had always said by the time I turned 40, I wanted to sell it or get investors. And I ended up realizing that I wanted to sell it because I knew that eventually I would want to exit. I at that point, I was probably 37, 38 at that point. I had a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. And I didn't have small babies anymore. And it kind of also
Mhm.
felt a little weird to like show up on social media. And yes, I could talk about all of these products as a parenting expert. I was working with them all the time, but I wasn't using these products anymore. And it felt a
Mhm.
little inauthentic. I had built this business upon the authenticity of being a parent. And while I could absolutely like weigh in with my experiences, things change and I wasn't a young mom anymore. And so I
Mhm.
knew that as kind of I was approaching the 40-year-old mark, that was kind of my like end game ish. And
Mhm.
what ended up happening was I hired this CFO. I turned over my CFO around the time I was 37, 38, I think it was. And she and I were like sitting together at Starbucks one day and I got an inquiry on LinkedIn about someone who was just very interested in hearing more about my business. And that ended up turning into the company that I sold my company to. But at the same time, within about 4 6 weeks of that inquiry, I had 2 other people reach out to me about my business,
Wow. Mhm.
and a lot of it had to do with my relationship with Target, which is still ongoing. Like, Bum Club is
Mhm.
still working with Target, so it's been almost 10 years that they started, that we started this partnership with Target. It was really enticing for outside partners, and, I examined these 3 opportunities and options, and I picked the one that best suited me. Um,
Mhm.
so ultimately it was a combination to answer your question. It was like I knew I wanted this to happen, but then I was given these 3 opportunities and I decided to make one work.
Mhm. Mhm. Wow. And so for the woman who's at home, like, wait, I'm still trying to get my idea on paper. She's like, I'm still trying to figure this out whether or not my idea is a business. What would you say to her as you've gotten to the point where you've now sold that company and you are on to other things that you want to work on right now? What would you say to her if she's at the very beginning?
The first thing I would say is to sit down and write what I call not a business plan. I'm not a big believer in business plans because I think they're really restrictive, but I call it a flexible blueprint, and I talk about this all the time. And to me, what that means is you sit down and you write out kind of how you think your business is going to work, and how your vision is going to come to life. And more importantly, what are your revenue streams and what are your costs? Really, those 3 things are the most important. And then from
Mhm.
there, just do it.
Mhm.
Like honest to God, like you are never going to be in a perfect place. It's never going to be the most perfect time.
So
If
true.
just put it out there, even if it's something so simple as sending an email. Like I'm a big proponent in this too. People who follow me know I say this all the time. Like email everyone you know. You email everyone you know. And even if you don't have like a proof of concept yet, say, I am going, not I think, I am going to be doing this. It would be really helpful if you followed me here on social media or signed up for my newsletter or let people know.
Mhm.
You will know after that email if you have a concept that people are interested in. Because even if your contacts are not people that are going to consume from you, they all have networks. And if it's really that great, they will forward it on, they will follow you, they will share, and they will support you
Yeah.
because they know you and they
Yeah.
trust you. So that's where I
Yeah.
would start. Don't get hung up in the perfection of like, I don't have an email or I don't have a website. Just like do it. Like that stuff can come with time. And I know plenty of women, and I've had some of them on my own podcast, who have started businesses without a website and with a Gmail account.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then they're like, "Oh my
Yeah.
god. Oh gosh, like I have this business and I have clients and I have no website. I should probably make one." So,
Right.
and
Right.
that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those things, where everyone wants to get it right the first time. And I'm like, I don't know that there is a right except for the decisions that you need to make as they approach. But if you don't put yourself out there, you'll never know.
Never know.
You'll never know. Yeah. And so many people will sit in that I'll never know spot for a while. And I really want to get them out of that shuffle of maybe I can, and then there's this other group for us, Lindsay, who are looking to grow their businesses from one stage to the next because they've sat in a point of, opened the business and got it going for a few years and now they're ready to grow it. What were some of the things that you utilized as growth strategies as a bootstrapper, where the cash is tight, but you really still want to gain that traction?
So 3 things that I think are very important: your community, your network, which are 2 different things, and also partnerships. So your community are the people who are engaging with you, not just on social media, but at events. They're the people who show up for you, and it's a two-way engaged street, right? Like, I like to say community, not audience, because an audience is someone who watches and consumes, and a
Mhm,
community is a group who actively participates. And if you
mhm,
have a solid community, they will share what you are doing. And they will. And really and truly, all you have to do is ask them. Honest to God, like, share your
mhm,
story, share your why. They're there because they have bought into you and your mission, and they will share it. And even if you need to give them a little nudge, like, give me a review on Yelp or share me in your stories, they will, because they support you. Hands down.
mhm,
Utilize your
mhm.
community, your network. So your network are obviously all the people that are surrounding you, not just consuming your business, but the people that you have built up over time through, your professional life, through your personal life. Look at your network and see who is there. Examine them. Literally examine them. Who can help you? Or
Mhm.
if you need something, like maybe you need someone to help you with PR and you don't really know what to do. Look at your network, and if you don't know someone, put it out there. I'm looking for someone to help me with PR. I have a limited budget. Does anyone know anyone? I guarantee you someone will know someone, and someone might even know someone who says to you, "You know what? I'm willing to give you a couple of hours for free." Like,
Mhm.
you'd be really surprised. Women, especially female founders, so want to help other female founders. And so, again, if you don't put it out there to your network, no one will know. And then the most concrete way that we were able to grow Bump Club, and that I'm growing my current community now, which is female founders, is through partnerships. And partnerships look so many different ways, but at the end of the day, whether it's an Instagram takeover or an event with someone or an interview or a podcast interview, this is a partnership. I'm going to share your podcast to my community with me on it and tell people to listen, and you're going to share my episode to your community. That's a partnership.
Mhm.
And so I really encourage people to look at partnerships and get creative. How can you borrow people's communities and, their networks to expand your own? And
Yeah.
with Bump Club, a lot of that was through brands. We worked first with local companies, then we had experts. When we had experts talk at Bump Club, they shared the events that they were speaking at. It was like a
Mhm,
very natural way of sharing. And
mhm.
then when we were working with brands, the brands would say, "Oh, go to the Bump Club event. You're going to win X, Y, and Z stroller." It was very natural. So
Yeah.
there are so
Yeah.
many different ways to partner. Think about them and think about how you can work with other people to not only grow yourself, but to help someone else as well. And that is, I think, really, really what is important about a partnership, is that it benefits both entities, and you have to
Mhm.
show up expecting that.
Yeah, that's so good. Oh my goodness. So, Lindsay, were there any money or mindset shifts that you had to make in order to like believe that you were capable of doing it all the things that you are called to do? Like, were there those times where you were like, Lindsay, you can do this. Lindsay, you're gonna have to cut this habit to become more of yourself here, or any of that stuff
You
that you
know,
had to shift?
I don't know that I ever, made some like grand shift. I think the big money mindset for me was when I left the Hearst Corporation in 2010, or it was actually January of 2011. I had just had a baby, and you know, it was a big deal. I had a really great salary. I loved my job. There wasn't anything I disliked about it. But
Mhm.
I had this calling, to your point, that like I knew I wanted to do this and I knew I wanted to pursue it. And so my husband and I sat down, and we kind of just said, like, what's the worst that happens? And that's my barometer, is what's the worst that happens? What's the worst that
Uh-huh.
happens? This doesn't take
Right.
off and I go get another job. Like, I had people calling me for a year after in ad sales asking if I wanted a
Yeah.
job. So I could have always gone back. Um but the biggest mindset for me was all of a sudden I wasn't going to have this steady paycheck anymore. And what are we going to, what's going to happen? And, the goal was the first year to pay the nanny. It was to pay the
That's a
part-time
good
nanny.
goal.
It was a
'Cause they
nanny
are
share.
mandatory.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was a nanny share. It was part-time. I
Yeah.
had her 3 days a week, and during those 3 days, I busted my butt. Like, there were no manicures, there were no lunches, like, I busted my butt, and after that first year, I was able to add a 4th day, and, then we ended up getting
Mhm.
full-time childcare, and I more than covered my childcare. So, that
Mhm.
was probably the biggest shift for me,
Mhm.
was also, like, at Hearst, I had an expense account, right? So, like,
Yes, I
I
miss
had
those, yeah.
right? Like, I had this
Yeah.
giant expense account, and I was expected to use all of it, and I had to take people to lunch, and I had to take people to concerts and to manicures and massages, and it sounds great, but it was still work.
Yeah.
Um, and so I didn't have those luxuries and perks anymore, but I was growing something for myself on my
Mhm.
own time, and I was able to spend time with my daughter during her first year. I
Mm.
mean,
That's so
I have
good.
she's 11 now, it's crazy, but,
Yeah.
um, and I've created something for myself that, yes, I probably work harder and more than I would have if I would have just stayed at Hearst, but
Mhm.
I'm doing it on my own time. I'm doing it for myself. I'm building my own legacy, and more important than anything, my legacy, which is my kids. My 2 daughters are able to see me doing this, and they know that they can do anything too, and that is really,
Yeah.
like, why I do this every day.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. I love that because that tells me a lot about what your legacy, what you see as your legacy is giving your daughters you being the wind beneath their wings and letting them know what's possible for them. And it's so important that they and we as women always have models, like have that model in front of us to know that it's possible and the blueprint. And so you even sharing your nuggets from your bootstrapping process and the acquisition process must have been daunting in its own form of getting
That could
that
be a whole
paperwork.
podcast, Sybil.
Oh my God. The paperwork, the trusting that you're making the right decision, knowing it's the right time, and the next chapter after, is something that's a whole other piece because, as you start thinking about these things all sound exciting until it's time. And you're like, wait, 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 wait. Is it happening? Is it really happening? Is this what I want to do? And, just having that certainty. So I love how sure footed you have been in doing what's right in the moment and trusting the moment.
And I really have trusted the moment. Like, and it wasn't just leaving Hearst. I left Advantage, who bought Bump Club, and that too was I left a paycheck,
Yeah.
to do something on my own. But I firmly believe that this whole process of building the community of Bump Club and selling it, and then going back to corporate I went back for 2 years. I worked for the company who bought Bump Club, 2.5,
Mhm.
and I believe that that really was the reason, and that was the force behind me doing what I'm doing today, which is helping female founders to find their own way and to find their own success and to navigate founding, growing, scaling, hopefully one day selling their own businesses.
Yeah.
Without that experience, I wouldn't have been able to do that. And I am, honest to God, the happiest I've ever been doing what I'm doing right now.
Mm,
So it
that's
was the
so
right
good.
time, and
Yeah.
you have to trust your gut in that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So I've been having this conversation with founders about sustainable habits, things that disciplines or things that you do that keep you going or give you the momentum. It could be sleep, it could be vitamins, it could be conversations with your great girlfriends or travel or whatever those things are. What are some of those things for you?
So one of the things that I've never wavered on, even in the beginning days of Bump Club, was making time for my friends. I mean, of course, my family's a given, but my
Mhm.
friends, and which is, I mean, no, like, seriously, no pun intended, because your podcast is called Great Girlfriends. But,
Yeah.
like, I believe that, like, those relationships are really what propel you forward. And I could not have done any of this, like, without my village, and a very big part of my village are my girlfriends. And
Mhm.
I have friends from kindergarten and first grade, all the way up to, like, my new
Mm.
mom friends. And so that is always one thing that I do try to make time at least once a week to see my girlfriends. I try to make time to work out. At the moment, it's kind of hard because I'm starting a new business, but But I do try to build into my week time to go for walks or ride the Peloton. And then I can listen to podcasts too, which is like, that's like a double duty, I guess.
Yeah.
And then of course my kids and my family, one of the things that really kind of came to a head during the pandemic, and it showed me really what was important, because before the pandemic, my husband and we were traveling all the time. My kids were in 1,000 activities. And then the pandemic happened and everything slowed down and shut down and we were at
Yeah.
home. And
Yeah.
now, even now, like by no means are things back to full blown normalcy, but we are much more back to normal than we were a year ago. Even now, my family has dinner together 5 nights a week, if not 6. And
Mhm.
we take that minute. My kids are not in activities every day. We picked 1 or 2 and we really slowed down. And so from dinner time until bedtime, I close my computer. We are together as a family. We eat together. We'll watch a movie. We'll watch a show, even just hang out on the couch, but we will all hang out on the couch together. And that to me
Mhm.
over the last 2.5 years has been amazing. And I really hope that that continues. And, I know as my
Yeah.
kids get older, it might be harder, but I really hope that that continues.
That's so good. It's such I'm there. I'm in those same moments with a 13 and an 11, and I am like, okay, my son's going to college in 4 years. What do I want him to have? Like in these moments, like you said, even if it's everyone on the sofa, we're together. It's that together piece, that teaching togetherness,
And even
you
if like
know?
my older daughter got a phone this year, and even if like she's, on her phone, but she's sitting with us, I would much rather her be on her phone than in her room.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
or sitting
Yeah.
next to us on the
Yeah.
couch on her phone than in her room. And actually when she's next to us and like looking at TikTok, she shows us stuff, we engage with her.
Right.
Like she's
You're
teaching me
entering
TikTok right
worlds.
now. And so it's like
Yeah.
I'd rather her do that with us versus in isolation. And
Yeah.
so I mean, I know there's gonna be some give take there, but that hour after dinner is, like, the best.
It is. It's so good. It's the richest time ever, and I trust me, Lindsay, when I tell you the way I mean, you're seeing the growth part of it. It's like that middle school, that teen age. Oh my gosh, my son. I now am like, let me just take in every single moment I can because clearly he's going away. It's happening. Like he's
I know.
growing out the door. Like I can feel it. And so I'm like, so even if it is the scroll moments, but we're doing it together, I'm fine
Me
because
too.
we're together. Yeah, I love that so much. So this new business that you're in, how can we support and keep up with you? And how can great girlfriends learn more about your female founder community?
Yeah, of course. So you can follow me on Instagram. It's at Lindsay Pinchuk. I share so much information, like
Mhm.
actionable, tangible steps that you can take for your business right there. So that's number one. Number two, you can listen to my podcast. It's called Dear FoundHer. And twice a week, I have big female founders on who tell their stories, the ups and downs of entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
And then everything else can be found on my website. It's lindsaypinchuk.com. I have a couple of free classes. I have some one-on-one workshops and ways to work with me. So there's a lot of different ways that you can seek out my information and seek out my help. And you can always DM me. It's me on the other end. I will get back to you. So if you have any questions, you can always DM me. But I'm totally like in the public and available.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for joining on today, Lindsay. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right, great girlfriends. Did you enjoy this week's episode of the podcast? If so, would you please give us your amazing review on iTunes? Every single review helps another great girlfriend get plugged into the podcast and the community. Speaking of community, make sure you join our Facebook group at The Great Girlfriends. Follow us on Instagram at The Great Girlfriends and on Twitter at _great GFS. I'm Sibylla Muti and I'm out. Peace.